Hello and welcome to Nbyula Talks. Before we begin, we have a few updates and reminders for you. We would love to have you be part of our Nbyula community. And you can do so by logging on to www.nbyula.com, where you can join communities related to your area of interest, register for upcoming Nbyula Talks, book one-to-one skylifts, and view other upcoming events. You can also take this opportunity to connect with fellow learners or the speaker by sending a connection request. When you connect with the speaker, you will be able to contact them directly as well as receive updates about their upcoming talks. Kindly note that during this session, you will not be able to switch on your camera or unmute your mic. To ask questions during the talk, go to the audience chat, type your question, and select Post Your Question. If your question has not been answered during the talk, you will be notified once it's been answered, or if your question has not been answered during the talk, you can go to www.nbyula.com and spin a quest, and your questions will be answered. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this talk broadens your horizons and takes you to new learning heights.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah. Let's begin the talk. Hang on a minute. How was that for an introduction? Not that great, right? What were some of the things that you noticed about this introduction that could have been better? How about something like, first of all, my expression, or second of all, my tone, or even just the introduction itself, that I didn't give enough information? Good thing you're here for this talk, because today we'll be discussing how to introduce yourself during the speaking exam and how to move on into part one. So let's do this again. Warm welcome to everybody joining us today. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sarah, and I'm a TESOL certified IELTS trainer. And today we'll be looking at how to introduce yourself during the speaking exam and looking at how it'll transition into part one. Okay, all right. So before we begin, I just want to know from you all, what are some of the reasons why we find ourselves hesitant to speak before or during the speaking exam? You guys can go ahead and tell me in the chat, and I will also post a poll. Go ahead, let me know. So what are some of the reasons? Could it be that we are nervous? Or maybe we have lack of knowledge about the topic, or maybe just lack of skills? Any other reasons that we could have as to why we would be hesitant during our speaking exam? Okay. Yes, a lot of people have said lack of knowledge of the topic, right? Okay. All right. So I feel like these are all reasons as to why, we might be hesitant during the speaking exam. And there are other reasons as well. We could just be, really stressed out, and we might forget things. So we might be hesitant when we're speaking, right? Okay, so don't worry. Today we'll begin learning how to introduce ourselves during the IELTS speaking section. All right, let's get started. First of all, before we get into that, just a brief introduction to the IELTS. Those of you who are learning about the IELTS for the first time, this will be just a quick little summary for you. And for those who have, already understood about the IELTS, this will just be a quick recap. So IELTS stands for International English Language Testing System, and it's for non-native English language speakers who are looking to work, study, or migrate abroad. This test tests your 4 language skills, which would be your reading, your writing, your listening, and your speaking. And today we'll be looking at the speaking section. So first of all, there are 3 parts to this section. You have part 1, part 2, part 3, okay? And today, again, we'll be looking at part 1 as the introduction comes into the part 1 of this exam. The total time that you have for the speaking section is 11 to 4 minutes. And ideally, part 1 will last for about 4 to 5 minutes. And also, in this part, you'll be asked general topics. So things about, your work, your family, your daily routine, if you're studying about what you're studying about, general topics. Okay. It's always a good idea to understand what you're being assessed on or how you're being assessed for each section of the exam. And today, again, we'll be looking at the speaking section and how you'll be assessed on that. So first criteria would be your fluency and coherence. This simply means how easily you're able to speak at length and how logically developed your ideas are. Okay, so how you're able to speak continuously without hesitating, without breaking in between, without taking long pauses, without using so many filler words like things like that. Okay, so that's what they'll be looking at for fluency and coherence. Next, we have lexical resource. This is quite a common criteria in all the sections of the exam, but they all have different, ways you're being assessed. Here, lexical resource, the examiner will be looking at the use of your wide range of vocabulary, how you are using different phrases, complex sentences, showing that you know a lot of vocabulary and know how to use it. All right. Next, it would be grammatical range and accuracy. We're going this way. Grammatical range and accuracy, where you have presentation of good grammar using the right tenses, sentence structure, things like that. And last but not least, pronunciation, where you show the ability to be understood, that you are speaking clearly, clarity in your sentences, clarity in your voice, okay, your tones, everything comes under pronunciation. This does not mean accent, don't get it confused. It just means how well you are enunciating, how well you are, when you're opening and closing your mouth, how the sound is coming out clearly, right? So that is the assessment criteria. So moving on to part one, this is basically an introduction and identification check, as well as you'll be answering a few questions. Now remember, all of this will be happening in the span of 4 to 5 minutes. So before you start stressing out about this exam now, just remember that this part just takes up 4 to 5 minutes. So think of it as a little bit of an ice-breaking session, okay? The examiner, what will happen is the examiner will introduce themselves, okay? They will introduce themselves and you will also introduce yourself. They'll check your ID. You'll be bringing either your passport or any form of identification. And then from there, they'll be moving on to ask you questions. Let's learn how to introduce ourselves for the first part of the speaking exam, right? So we just briefly talked about this. I'll go through it in more detail. The exam flow is as follows. The examiner will call you in, okay? Then they will ask you for your ID. Again, your ID would be some sort of passport or driver's license or any form of government ID, okay? You will confirm your details as the examiner checks. So the examiner will introduce themselves as well and then say, check your details, make notes about it, and then they will ask you what your name is and you will just tell them, okay? And then from there, the examiner will go on to ask you more basic general questions, okay? So from what you've said from your name, they'll gradually shift it into the first part of the exam. So for your introduction, let's talk about why introductions are important, okay? First of all, it's very important how you introduce yourself because first impressions are important. Let's go back to how I introduced myself during the session the first time. When you saw that, did you feel like, how did you feel? Did you think, oh, she doesn't look very friendly, or she looks very serious, or, I don't know where she stands today, like how to approach her. Maybe I looked unapproachable, right? So the way an introduction is very important is because it counts as your first impression. So be expressive, not too expressive, but have a gentle smile, just speak clearly and make sure that, the examiner knows you're comfortable. The examiner will understand that you are nervous and maybe this might be your first time attending the exam. So everything is taken under consideration. Just be confident and deliver your introduction. Also, an introduction is important because it acts as an ice-breaking session, right? When the examiner calls you in, they will also first uh, introduce themselves, and then they will ask you. So they are breaking the ice, and you will also be breaking the ice because they are asking you known facts. They'll be asking you your name or where you're from later on, things that you already know. So just to get you comfortable in that environment. Okay. Also, the introduction sets the tone for the whole session, right? So imagine if you had an examiner, let's do it the other way around. If you had an examiner who had a stern face and was not smiling so much or was not very expressive, it would also make you uncomfortable, right? Same way goes if you sit there with a stern face, not very expressive, or you show that you're a little nervous or scared or something like that, the examiner will be able to pick up on it. If you are nervous, they'll try and ease your nervousness and get you in and make you a bit more comfortable. But at the same time, imagine how you would like it to be. So make sure that you set the tone with your introduction by the way of expressions and by the way you speak as well. Also, an introduction is quite important because it gives the other person an idea of who you are. When I introduced myself at the beginning, all I said was my name and let's get started, right? And that wasn't a very good introduction. It didn't give you any kind of idea what I'm doing, where I'm from, who am I. But when we moved on to the second introduction, I said my full name, I said my qualification, and I added a bit more fillers so that it made a full rounded introduction. Okay, so now we're going on to how to introduce ourselves. First of all, take a deep breath. Okay, make sure you get all the nerves out. You can do this before the exam as well. But if by chance, when you get into the room, everything gets serious, take another deep breath, smile, and then go ahead and state your name. So the examiner will ask you, what is your name? So you will say, my name is Sarah, or whatever your name is. And then they might ask you what you can be called. So sometimes people have difficult names, names that may not be easily pronounceable. So you can say, if you have a nickname or whatever it is, you can tell them there, you can call me such and such. Okay. Always be ready for the next question and be prepared for the next question that they will ask. Usually from here, after they confirm your identity, they will slowly start moving into part one. So be ready for that. But before that, here are some useful sentences for you. So when you're introducing yourself, typically we might say something like myself this, or I am this, or something like that. But it's always good to put a greeting before you introduce yourself, something like, hi, I am Sarah, or my name's Sarah, or my name is Sarah. Okay. And if they ask you, again, like we talked about, if you have any other way, if your name is longer or they can't pronounce it, they will ask you, and what should I call you? If it is something that is difficult, you can say, you can call me such and such. If it's the same thing, you can say, you can call me Sarah. Okay? When they discuss about where you live, you might have a question, a follow-up question, where you come from or where are you staying? You can say, I live in and I hail from. If the place where you are from is not the same place where you live, that's where the second question, second line comes in. Otherwise, you can just say, I live and I hail from Kerala. Okay, that's my example. Okay, they might give a follow-up question saying, asking you, how long have you lived there? You can say, I have been living here or I have been living there. If you're currently residing in that place, here. If you aren't living there at the moment, you would say, I have been living there for X amount of years. Okay. Again, follow-up questions will be asked about the topic. So another thing that they might ask you is, what can you do there? What are some tourist attractions, or what do you like about your city? Here's a sentence that might help you. The most interesting part for me is probably, okay. And if you are studying, you can say something like, I am studying. whatever you're studying. I studied, if you have completed your course, or I'm planning on studying. So as a student, you'll be taking this exam probably to migrate abroad for studies, higher studies. So here you can tell them, I am planning on studying. Now, I'd just like to take a minute here to discuss these tenses that I've put here. Tenses are very important, and you need to listen carefully what the examiner is asking you. So you have to understand the tense to say, are they speaking in the present? I need to answer in the present. Are they speaking in the past? I need to reply in the past. Or if it's futuristic, I need to respond in the future, right? All right, so that's where the tenses come in. So that's another helpful tip for you to understand when you're preparing for the speaking exam, to understand tenses. Okay, some more useful sentences. If they ask you about your home or where you stay, or the building that you live in, it would be something like, where are you staying right now? You can say something like, I live in a spacious apartment, or I live in a spacious bungalow, in the suburbs or in the city. Okay, know where you're living. If you're living outside the city, it is the suburbs. If you're living in the city limits, say city. They might go on to say, who do you live with? I live with whoever, my parents, I live alone, I live with my family, etc. All right, another tense coming up. If you're not living there now, currently, you will say something like, I have been living there for, or I lived there for. Have been living there is present. Okay, so you say, I have been living there for X amount of years. And again, if you're not living there right now, I lived there for X amount of years. Right? Same thing, I have been living here, I have been living there for. Again, if they ask you, what is the most important part, interesting part, you'll say this. Again, studying tenses, I put this again so that you understand the tenses. Studying, studied, planning on studied. Present, past, future. All right, so let's have a quick run through of how the speaking exam would be. Here's an example question that we have, introduction and interview. So understand that task 1 and part 1, again, repeating this, that it is somewhat of an introduction and an interview, which will only last for 4 to 5 minutes. So you don't need to stress too much on part 1 because they are asking you things that you already know. So again, going through the topics, things like where you work, where you studied, about your family, about your friends, maybe about your town, the tourist attractions there, about your hometown, about where you stay, as in if it's an apartment or a house, your daily life, your daily routine, things like that. Those will be the common topics that would be there. Okay, so I'll read this out for you. Part 1, introduction and interview. This part of the test begins with the examiner introducing himself or herself and checking the candidate's identification. It then continues as an interview. So it's important that when you're practicing, you understand the exam flow so that it might help you break that nervousness when you go into the exam room, because okay, this is going to happen. The examiner will speak first. The examiner will introduce themselves first, and then I can introduce myself. So maybe when you set a plan, you can say, okay, here's how I'm going to introduce myself, and practice that. Again, you might not need so much practice because it's about you. So just make sure that your sentences are correct and that you're relying the information that is asked of you. Nothing more and nothing less. Right. So it'll sound something like the examiner will come in and explain, this is the IELTS test. They'll be recording your test so that later on they can go back and listen to it and assess you. They'll say the exam center name, the candidate name, the candidate number, things like that. And then they'll ask you, can you please tell me your name? So we'll do the little mock introduction part 1. They'll ask you, what is your name? So I would respond, my name is Sarah. Then they would ask you, what should I call you? So I will say, you can call me Sarah. Next, they will ask you, they will go on to ask you about, let's talk about your town, hometown, or village. So as we have here an example, this is just an example. It could be any question. Okay, so here they'll say, now I want to know a few more things about you. Let's go on to talk about your hometown or village. What kind of place is it? So hang on, let's take a pause. These are some of the follow-up questions that you could give an answer to. They might only say one line. So they might just say, what kind of place is it? You will have to also go on to say, the most interesting part of your town or village, the kind of jobs that people do there. And you say why it's a good place to live. So all this kind of rounds up your answer. They will just push you with the first line. So let's give an example. My name is Sarah. I live in Bangalore, but my hometown is Kerala. Kerala is actually known as God's own country, and it is very close to the coast. So we have tons of beaches, and it's a touristy place. People come from all over the world to visit Kerala and to visit Trivandrum. That's a city that I live in. It's a very metropolitan city, and it has close to, let's think. Take a minute to think. If you get stuck, you can, but also just remember to get your flow back as well. So yeah, you can talk about the kind of place, if it's a touristy place, if it is a city, or whether you live in the suburbs, how many people live there, the kinds of people that live there, all that you can fix in there. The most interesting part of my town or village, so the most interesting part of Trivandrum is that it has a lot of beaches. I love the beach and I love going to the beach and relaxing there. So I find this the most interesting part. During family vacations also, when our family comes down to visit, we would always go to the beach, always have a good time there, etc. They might also, you can also bring in the kind of jobs. If you get stuck, the examiner has prompts. So this might be a prompt that they could ask you. What kind of jobs do people in your town or village do? You can explain that. You can also say why it's a good place to live. Definitely add it into your answer. Again, the examiner can prompt you if you are feeling stuck. So you can say, I'll tell you why it's a good place to live. The climate is good, even though it's hot, you still get cool winds coming in. Also, the best time is when it's a rainy season. I also love the rain and it cools down the area, etc. After you finish speaking for a little bit about that, they will probably say something like, all right, let's move on to talk about accommodation. Tell me the kind of accommodation you live in. All right. Now you see the follow-up questions, but that would be your prompting line. Tell me about the kind of accommodation you live in. So you could say something like, I live in a flat. It's a 4-bedroom, spacious flat. I live with my family. I have one sister and a brother. We all live together, etc. How long have I lived there? Put that in there as well. I have lived there for all my life. I've lived there, you can give a year or you can just say however long, right? You can talk about what you like about living there. So you can say something, if it's an apartment that you live in, you can talk about the apartment community. I like living there because all my friends live in different buildings and it's just walking distance. I can just go visit my friends every day after I finish work or after I finish school, whatever it may be, and I can just hang out with them. And the apartment has a lot of facilities that I can use. They have a sports center, etc. You can just give details about it. Remember, the information might not have to be true. They just want to assess how you are speaking and your flow and your fluency. All right. You can also, yes, say the kind of accommodation you would most like to live in. So this is a future question. So talking about, maybe you might not like living in a flat, or maybe you have an opinion about it. You can say, I actually wouldn't mind moving into a house because it's more spacious. I'll have my own space. I will have my own privacy. In an apartment, there are no backyards. There's no space for a garden. But if I had a house, I can garden because I have a garden to plant because I love gardening. You can go on to say that. So make sure you are speaking, understanding the question, whether it's past, present, or future, and answering accordingly. All right. So here are a few tips for you to remember. First of all, when you're going into the exam, be confident. You would be practicing maybe a couple of times or maybe 100 times before you enter the exam. So you'll be confident then. We all understand that it might be a little overwhelming, a little stressful. Nerves might get the best of you when you're entering the exam. That's okay. Just keep your cool and be confident. Next thing is practice, practice, practice. This is very important. If you're somebody who's not so well versed in speaking or you get nervous when you speak, you would know that practicing always helps you. All right. When you're practicing, practice speaking all the time, practice speaking with your family, practice speaking with your friends, whoever's around there, grab them and say, can you just practice with me? And, have a proper conversation with them as well. Be expressive. Sometimes the examiner might not be looking at you when you're speaking, but they'll be listening to you. They might be making notes, they might be looking out the window. Don't get distracted. I'm saying this because they'll be able to hear your expressions. If you are smiling when you're speaking, but they're not paying attention, they'll be able to hear that. So do be a little expressive, not over the top, but just have gentle expressions on your face. I say don't be over expressive because when you're going into part 2 and part 3 of the exam, you might be speaking about something that might be a serious issue in the sense the topic that's given to you. So you might not need to smile as much, but do keep a still expression. Sorry. All right. Also be natural. Be natural in the sense, um, don't be too soft, don't be too loud. Make sure that your tone is consistent. All right. And also you can keep here's where your accent comes in. You can keep your natural accent. You do not need to put on an accent for this exam. The only thing that you need to worry about your accent is whether it is clear. So some of us might have a very strong accent. The more you practice, the more your accent will be a little neutralized. But you do not need to learn a new accent or do not need to adjust your speaking or your accent in order to attend this exam. The way you speak is perfectly fine, so just be natural. Also, when you are in the middle of the exam and you are unable to answer the question, or you might need a little time to think, as you saw how I needed a little time to think, you can always buy time. And how you buy time is how, you can just ask the examiner, could you please repeat that? Or give a filler sentence like, I think, or I believe that, when it's maybe, for example, if you're talking about tourist attractions and you're not too sure at the moment, if it doesn't come to you, say, I believe that, some people like this attraction or they come to my city for this example. So you can always buy a little time, not too much time, but just repeat the question or just give fillers. And last but not least, avoid lists. So I have written this here because sometimes the examiner might ask you, what is your daily routine? And it's easy for us to say, okay, I wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I get ready for work, or I get ready for school, or I get ready for college. Avoid those kind of lists because you're not really demonstrating your language fluency or your lexical resource. You're just spitting out facts. You're just giving sentences. To make it more rounded, add fillers. I like it because, like I gave you the example about, we have a lot of beaches around. So as a family, we liked going there. When family came to visit, we all used to go to the beach, right? So give a well-rounded answer. All right, so these are the tips that I have for you for your speaking exam. Do keep in mind the format, understand how you're being assessed first, understand the marking criteria, understand the flow of the exam, how you'll be called in, what kind of questions you might be asked. Practice, practice, practice speaking whenever you can so that it boosts your confidence and boosts your overall confidence, how you feel about yourself as well. Be natural. Again, no need to put on accents, be expressive. Buy time. Understand that when you're practicing as well, you can also buy time. Pretend like, whoever is asking you the question can, be the examiner. Ask them to repeat it. Practice, practice, practice. Right? Okay. Now we're on to the audience Q&A. If you have questions, go ahead and type it in the box. All right. Also, I see that we have some new people here. Again, a very warm welcome to you guys. Do take this opportunity to connect with fellow learners that you see here present on today's talk. Also, you can connect with me as well, or once you connect with me, you'll get updates and different events that I'll be having for the IELTS exam, different upcoming Nbyula talks and things like that. So do connect with me as well. Right, do we have any questions? One common question that I just briefly touched when I said understand the assessment criteria, I also said understand the marking criteria. Here, I'll just explain briefly how the marking criteria works. As you know, we have 4 criteria which will be assessed on. So each one carries a band score of 0 to 9, and you'll be marked accordingly. And after that, whatever band score you get in each criteria will then be added together and average, presenting you with your final speaking score for part 1. You also have part 2 and 3. So they're the same, it's the same marking criteria. All right. Also, you can, questions coming in, sorry. Okay, again, just going through some tips for you guys. Just be confident, keep practicing. Practice every single time. Whenever you get a chance, do practice. Okay, getting some more questions in, hopefully. Yep. Okay. Yes. Anything? Also, you can tell me in the question below, in the comments below, how we discussed about the poll at the beginning. What are some reasons why we find ourselves hesitant to speak before or during our speaking exam, besides being nervous, besides lack of knowledge about the topic, besides lack of skills? Any more that you guys feel that, you know, this is the reason why we feel hesitant to speak? Not confident, feeling stressed out? Okay. All right. I think we're coming towards the end of our session. Guys, thank you so much for joining today. I hope that this session brought you some more information about the speaking exam. I hope you were able to learn how to introduce yourself during the speaking exam, as well as continue into part 1 of the exam. If you found this video helpful, do like it, share it, and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you know of your friends or whoever is preparing for the IELTS exam, not only for the speaking, if it's listening, reading, and writing, I do have upcoming Nbyula talks about these topics. So do connect with me, do check on our website and see and look at the upcoming talks that we have. Our next talk will be on Tuesday and we'll be covering things about the listening exam. So do have a look. Yeah, I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. After this session, there'll be a feedback link going out, so do give your feedback as well. Thank you so much for joining. I hope to see you guys next time.